This channel now has a growing selection of route guides on it. They vary from point-to-point rides, such as Birmingham to Worcester, or the longest route I've done yet, Birmingham to Barmouth. It also features a lot of cycling loops, starting and ending at the same place. All the routes use a variety of cycling terrain, ranging from smooth tarmac cycleways, bridleways, canal towpaths, disused railways, and quiet lanes. I've been known to ford the odd stream and very occasionally climb the odd mountain. But what I always try to avoid, even in the biggest of cities, are main roads, with a few of my routes avoiding roads altogether. I quite often get asked on my videos, how do I plan these routes? So in today's video, I want to go through some tips to planning the perfect gravel ride. I'll go through the resources and the websites that I use that enable me to plan these routes and avoid main roads where possible. So after watching this video, you should be able to plan some great rides yourself, no matter where you live in the country. There's 5 different resources or websites that I want to cover today that will help you to plan the perfect gravel or mixed surface ride. Some of these resources you may already have knowledge of, but hopefully I can show you how to use them to the full potential and also show you a few new ones as well, so make sure you stick around to the end and get all 5 of these tricks and tips. Before we get stuck into number 1, it's worth mentioning that when you are planning a ride, it's a good idea to use a piece of software to plan it out. Personally, if I wasn't able to plan a route and then send it to my phone or my Garmin head unit, I would definitely get lost on the way around the route. I use Garmin Connect to plan my routes, and I do that because it's nice and easy to send it to my Garmin head unit once I've completed the route. I don't use it because it's the best one. I've not tried many others. I did previously use Strava to plan my routes until they made that a paid feature. My point here is that you should be using something, whatever you're comfortable with and what works best for you, and that you're able to take that route and either send it to your phone so you're able to look at it on your way around your route, or if you have a bike computer that's capable of navigation, that you're able to send it to that so it's able to guide you around. I've been asked quite a few times which head unit I use for these rides, and I have a Garmin Edge Touring which came out in 2013 I believe, so it's over 12 years old now. And when I want to upload and download data to it, I have to use a cable, would you believe it? None of this fancy Wi-Fi or Bluetooth connection. But you know what, it still works and I don't feel any need to replace it. It still does the job I bought it for, so if it ain't broke, why try to fix it, as they say. Right, I think it's time to get stuck into these tips for planning a great gravel ride. So let's start with number 1, and that is to use Google Maps. And when I say use Google Maps, I'm not talking about use its navigation feature, as in I want to plan a bike ride from A to B and ask it to plot the route for you, because I think it doesn't always give you a great cycling route, even when you've selected cycling as the mode of transportation that you're using. The way that I use Google Maps is to use that above view to look for areas of green space that I can maybe link together that take me on the way that I want to go, and to look at those green spaces and see if there are any trails running through them, which are quite often marked on Google Maps. You can see here in South Birmingham we have Woodgate Valley Country Park, a wide area of green space, and zooming in we can see that there is a trail running through it. And we can also see that that trail continues through South Birmingham over towards Selly Oak. And even when the trail ends, we can use this satellite view to zoom right in, and we can see that there is actually a cycle path down the side of the road here. So spending some time on this satellite view and zooming in on the areas that you want to travel through, you can quite often find trails and traffic-free routes to take you to where you want to go. And when you can't avoid the road, you can also look for roads that are much quieter than other ones. On my Dudley Loop video, I needed to get from Halesowen into Birmingham and into Woodgate Valley Country Park. And using satellite view, I found this quiet road here, Lapel Line South, which was able to take me across there. And it was much better than the much busier road here of Carter's Lane, and I could see that simply by zooming in on Google Maps. So quite often, looking at the area that you're looking to travel through from above, it's quite easy to identify the quieter roads from the busier ones. It's also quite a good tool to be able to identify canal routes and old railway lines. Looking from above, these old railway lines and canals really stand out. Disused rail lines really do actually leave a scar on the landscape, even if they're not in use as a greenway or a cycle track, and so they're quite easy to identify. You can see here the South Staffordshire Railway walk heading through Lower Penn really stands out on the Google satellite view. And when you know a route does exist, such as a canal, you really can have a look at where the canal goes and zoom right in to have a look at how good the towpath is as well. And you can quite often see from above how well the towpath is surfaced, or if not at all. Here I'm zooming in to the Tame Valley Canal as it runs past the Alexandria Stadium and under the M6 here. And you can see quite clearly just by zooming in on the satellite view that the towpath is really good. It's definitely a concrete surface or tarmac surface, and it's quite wide, so this will be quite a nice ride down here. And that's it for Google Maps really. Just use that satellite view, look from above, look for those green corridors and trails, and zoom in as far as you can to get that detail, and that'll help you plan out your ride and find those traffic-free routes that you want to ride on. So now it's time to move on to my second tip, and the second resource you can use to plan these rides. And it's quite closely linked to Google Maps, and that is Google Street View. You could maybe pretend that Google Maps and Google Street View are the same thing. I'd take that argument, but this is my video, and 5 tips sounds better than 4, so we're going with this as a separate thing. So when you've used Google Satellite View or something else to plan your route, but you didn't get enough detail from that satellite view, or you just want to be sure of how things are, this is where Street View comes in, and it can be really handy in a couple of ways. First of all, if you're looking at a road and you wonder if it's a quiet road or not, and you can't quite tell from Google satellite imagery, you can use Street View to really get a close-up view and almost feel like you're riding on that road. So for example, let's take a look at this section of road here that runs between the South Staffordshire Railway and the Staffs and Wush Canal down in South Staffordshire. Now I want to get from the railway here, so we can zoom right in, and then if we click and go to Street View at the bottom, we can see the railway there crossing the road. We can see the road that will come down as we leave the railway, and here we can move along the Himley Lane here to see exactly what it's like before we actually cycle it, and decide whether it's something that we want to ride on or maybe something to be avoided. You can see that the road is not split into 2 separate lanes clearly, so it's not going to be a massively busy road, and hopefully that means that traffic is also going to run down here a little bit slower, although that's not always a given. So that's the first way to use Google Street View. You can use it to literally look at the road that you're going to cycle on and get a street view of it and see exactly what it's going to be like before you decide that your route is going to take that road. So that's the obvious way to use Google Maps, where you're able to zoom straight in and see the street view of where you're going to cycle. But I also have found it useful for looking at trails that might not be quite so obvious from above whether they're worth using or not. In some cases you might get lucky and the trail you want to use might actually be on Google Street View. For example, here between Bath and Bristol is the old railway, which I actually ran a marathon down, and you can actually zoom right into the railway, and if you click on the spot that you want to have a look at, you'll find that there's actually a street view of this trail. This isn't a road, this is a running, walking and cycling trail, but actually it's been mapped and had a street view put in of it, and it's really handy. And I was actually able to carry on all the way up this trail between Bath and Bristol and having a look what it was going to be like before I actually ran my marathon down it. So if it's a busy trail, there might be a good chance that you'll already have a street view on it, so you can look exactly what it's going to be like. But if it's a less busy trail, like this section of the Staffs and Wush Canal just outside Pencoridge, it's not possible to get a street view of the trail itself, and it's not always possible to get an idea of what the trail's going to be like looking from above. So let me give you a little tip on how to use Street View to get an idea of what these trails are going to be like. So if we look at this section of canal from above, here it is just north of Pencoridge, we can see that it crosses over a road, and this is where it's handy to use Google Street View. If we click on that bridge over the canal, go to Street View, just make sure we're in the middle of the canal there, we can have a look either side and you can see what the trail is like. So here you can see that it is a dirt trail, but it's definitely something that you could cycle along. So where you've got a long stretch of unknown trail or canal like this, where you're not sure what the surface is like, look for those touch points where it crosses paths with the road, and then use Street View to get down and have a look what that trail looks like from the ground. And it doesn't always have to cross paths with the road. You can see here this section a little farther north runs right next to the road, so we can use Street View to have a look at the road and get that ground level view of what this towpath looks like. And as this runs alongside the road for quite a while, we can keep going down and having a look how the towpath is. so we really have a good idea what this towpath's like before we ride on it. And that is not a great towpath, to be honest, but I still rode down it. But importantly, I knew what I was getting into when I planned to ride down this section of canal. So that's tip number 2 dealt with. So it's time to move on to tip number 3 for planning the perfect gravel ride. And that is to use heat maps. If you're not sure what a heat map is, it's essentially a map of an area which will give you a good idea of how many times a certain road or trail has been ridden down. And the logic is that if a certain road or trail has been ridden down a lot, then it must be an okay place to cycle. So we can use this to gauge whether a trail in particular is suitable for cycling. If a lot of people have ridden down it, you're probably going to be okay. There's 2 main places where you're able to get a heat map, and they are Garmin and Strava. I prefer to use Garmin because Garmin Connect is where I plan my rides, so it's easy to plan them whilst looking at the heat map at the same time. So this is the view you get when you're planning a ride in Garmin Connect, and essentially the darker that purple line, the more people that have ridden down that trail. And I'm going to take an example here. I'm going to have a look at the Trent and Mersey Canal between Great Haywood and Stone, because this is a section of canal that would be really handy to ride down, but as you can see, you don't see the purple line till you zoom in quite far, and it's actually quite a light purple line, so that's telling me that not a lot of people ride down this section of canal, which gives me a good indication that it's probably not a great surface and maybe I should avoid using that section of canal. For contrast, let's go down and look at Great Haywood, where the Trent and Mersey Canal meets the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal. And we can see here at the junction that there's quite a strong purple line. People are riding south up the Trent and Mersey Canal, but they're not carrying on past Haywood Junction. They're taking a left and heading down the Staffs and Worcester Canal, which tells me that bit south is probably okay, but heading north from there is probably not the best idea. We can also have a look at Cannock Chase here. This is what I did while planning my Stafford Loop video. You can see the strong purple lines, and this is where people are cycling most often. So those dark purple lines are most likely to be good for cycling, so we should include them if we're planning a route. And that's it for tip number 3 really. Essentially, have a look where people have cycled before. If a lot of people are cycling that section, you're probably going to be okay. If they're not, maybe have a look at elsewhere, or investigate further into how good that trail is going to be. Okay, it's now time to move on to tip number 4 for planning the perfect gravel ride. And tip number 4 is to use the National Cycle Network map. Now I'll be the first to admit that the National Cycle Network in the UK is far from perfect, but the map of this network can be a great basis for planning a fantastic route, as it clearly shows on and off-road sections of the network. So to access this map, Google National Cycle Network, scroll down till you see the OS Maps link, click on that, and then if we just move this side tab out the way, we can zoom in and you'll be able to see this map of the National Cycle Network. Now you can see on the map there are parts marked in blue and parts marked in orange. Now the blue parts are on-road parts of the National Cycle Network, and these are likely to be relatively quiet lanes, with the orange parts being completely off-road and traffic-free. So as you can see, this can be a really good basis for making a good ride. I've zoomed in on this area of the Southern Peak District, where you can see that the High Peak and Tissington Trails, both part of the National Cycle Network, are linked together by various other parts of the National Cycle Network, and that's what I use to form my High Peak and Tissington Trail loop. We can also see that the Tissington Trail is linked to the Manifold Trail in the north via the National Cycle Network, but doesn't quite connect in the south, so I use that as a basis and use my other tips to link it up in the south to make a loop. And that was my Tissington and Manifold Trail loop video. You can also access this resource through the Walk Wheel Cycle Trust website. If you head over to that and click on the National Cycle Network section of this, scroll down a little bit and you'll find a link to a map of the National Cycle Network, and you can see that takes us through to the same Ordnance Survey map where we were before, and you're able to see this great view of all the National Cycle Network trails in the country. A really useful resource and one I'd recommend using when planning your mixed surface or gravel rides. So now we're moving on to my final tip for planning these rides, and that is to use local knowledge, which is quite easy to say, but how do you go about accessing this local knowledge and actually speak to people that live in an area that you're planning to cycle through? Well, my advice is to use internet forums or Facebook groups. I'm a member of quite a few Facebook groups and I find these most useful. If I'm planning to head through somewhere that I'm not sure about, these other tips and tricks that I've talked about in the start of this video haven't given me the answer that I want and I'm still not sure about a particular trail or route, I'll always ask on one of these Facebook groups and I'll normally get an answer. My favourite Facebook group is Cycling UK Canals and Old Railways. As you might have noticed, these are my favourite places to ride, canals and disused railways. You'll find lots of people sharing great routes on here, as well as being a great place to ask about your own potential routes. So don't be afraid to join up to these Facebook groups, ask some questions and take some advice. They're a great resource and really help in planning these sort of multi-surface and gravel rides. And that's all 5 of my tips and tricks for planning the perfect multi-surface or gravel ride. So just to recap, first of all, we can use Google Maps. We use that satellite view to get a great view from above of what the area that we want to ride through looks like and where potential trails might be. We can then use Google Street View to get a better on-the-ground view of trails and roads. We can then move on to use heat maps to see if particular trails have been used a lot by other cyclists, giving us a good idea if they're going to have a decent surface. Tip number 4 was to use the National Cycle Network map. This shows us quiet roads marked in blue and those off-road trails marked in orange. And finally, get some local advice. Use those Facebook groups and local forums to find out where the best places are to ride in the area that you're planning to go to. So that's my 5 tips. If you think I've missed anything and there's anything extra that you use to plan your rides, please do let me know in the comments. I hope this has been a useful video, and if you've watched till this point you must have enjoyed it and found it useful. So please do help the channel roll along by subscribing. It's absolutely free and it helps me massively. Give this video a like, and if you've really enjoyed it, you can also buy me a coffee via the link in the video description. Thank you very much for watching. Happy planning and happy cycling.